City Council, May 1st, 2012 special meeting is now called to order. A roll call, Mrs. Bittner?
Mayor Daniels?
Here.
Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McGinnis? Here. Councilmember Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Teets?
Here.
Quorum present. We have two discussion items on the agenda. The first is going to be the proposed fiscal year 2012-2013 annual budget and three-year budget continuation. Mr. Zerle.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council, and thanks again for agreeing to have this meeting that will serve hopefully as a wrap-up. We had questions come in via email. Thank you so much for that. They pertained primarily to the Troy Historic Museum in Village Green, as well as questions revolving around the use of fund balance. There were other specific questions that we had that either Tom or Nino will be happy to address as well. But I'm wondering, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but staff would be happier. And in light of that, if there's any issues that pertain to the library that you want to discuss, I'll keep Kathleen Russ here. If not, I'll let her go home. So I'm just wondering if I may do that and go through the departments to see if the wrap-up involves any specific departments. If not, I'll send them home. I had no questions on the library.
Councilman Fleming?
Just to be clear, the library's budgeted at 6 days a week, exactly the way it's going now, same days, no change.
Short answer is yes. Is that, do I have to calibrate that?
Just to confirm the yes.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, thanks, Kathy. Chief Nelson, anything for the fire department? Okay, thanks, Chief. How about, before I talk about engineering and public works, Mr. Hootery has phase 2 to find the epicenter of alkali silica reactivity on Big Beaver Road. We need about an hour and a half. But if you have any questions on infrastructure, engineering, or public works, fleet, I'll hold them. If not, I'll dismiss them.
Councilman Fleming?
Just at the close of last night's meeting, and I also sent an email today, was just to clarify what plans we had for grants and so forth that may not be reflected in the budget.
As of now, everything that we know of is incorporated in the budget.
Mayor, did you want a clarification on the PASER system, how it's...
I don't think that's necessary this evening.
All right. Well then, gentlemen, thank you much. Hit the road. No pun intended there. All right, how about recreation? Jeff, thank you.
All right.
Chief Mayor and Nina Licari and Tom Darling they have what we call seasons tickets. They're staying regardless. And Susan Learstein has to stay as well for the second part of the agenda. But I'm wondering if there's any questions about IT and budget and wrapping up. Kurt, thank you. Now, do you have to hang around in case something goes wrong with the system?
I can, but...
Okay, Tom fix it? Okay, Tom said he'll fix it, so, all right, good. All right, well, thank you very much for that. I think it'll make for a meeting without staff having to listen if it doesn't pertain to their area. But obviously, Lorraine Campbell will be here, and she is here with John. And if you don't mind, perhaps we could delve right into the museum issue.
What about the other questions that were asked today? If not on the museum, we're going to do the museum first, we're going to follow through with
I'll work according to your convenience. If you want to talk about the fund balance issues first, we'll be happy to do that.
I'd like to.
Okay. All right. That's going to involve a trifecta, if you will, of Nino, Tom, and myself. And I'm going to start with Mr. Licari to talk about why he is so accurate, along with Oakland County every year, on developing the revenue stream. Okay. All right.
Stop.
Song and dance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to start off, I'd like to say we're pretty doggone accurate in our predictions. We run anywhere from 98 to 99% accurate in our revenue stream predictions. And we touched on this a little bit last night where I was telling you about the 2-year sales study and the 1-year sales study. The thing you have to understand about assessing in Michigan is that we're behind the market. We're measuring trends that have already occurred. So in any particular year on a 1-year study, it would run from September 30th through October 1st. So by the time I get to the board of review, my newest sale is already 6 months old. My oldest sale is 18 months old. When you get to a 2-year study, I've got pretty close to 30 months worth of sales there that I'm looking at. And the easiest way to track this trend, we do this all throughout the state of Michigan, is you take your current sale prices for any 1 year. This is a much simplified version of what I do. I wanted to make this as easy to understand as possible because we do this actually month by month. In certain instances, we do it week by week so that we can track a time change when we have to do an appraisal for an appeal. It's very important to us to be able to adjust that for time. As you know, the market up, down. So you need to be able to track those instances. I've summarized quite a bit of this for you here. So you can see the very first line is the 2009 sales. Again, it runs from September 30th through October 1st. Don't think calendar year here because we're not on a calendar year. We follow the state's fiscal year for the sales study. You can see the sale price about $103 million. The way you track this, because there has to be a constant involved here. Every year after I set assessments, we're equalized by the county and then by the state. We're equalized at 50%. So that means that number is constant. So the way you track the change in that is you compare the sale price to the most recent year's assessed value. You see that ratio was 53.85% for 2009, which resulted in a change of about 8% in the residential value. That is not what you saw in your budget, because there's a second step involved. There's taxable value, which is where your revenue stream comes from. In this particular instance back here, there was still a gap between assessed and taxable value. So what I had to do was I ran all the residential properties, I reduced them just on average 8% and saw what it did to the taxable value. That particular year, the CPI was, I think, 1.27%. So I could see what the change was going to be in the taxable value. As you can see, it was only 1.96%. We showed roughly a 2% drop that year in the residential class of properties. That was a direct hit on the revenue stream for the city. The very next year, in 2010, you see a huge drop in the assessed value. This is, I should point out again, in 2009, that's the first year we went to the 1-year sales study. So the hit was dramatic on the assessed value. 2010, that hit was even larger. We took a 14% drop in residential values based on that 55.05% ratio. The previous year, we had eaten up most of the difference between assessed and taxable value. So you could see that the change in taxable value was about 11.01% on residential. That's all in those 3-year budget projections that we've been showing all along. The very next year was about 5.72, and you can see it was almost identical on the taxable value because there's virtually no difference now between assessed and taxable value. Take a hit in assessed value, take a hit in taxable value. This is where I was talking about the 2012 year where they forced us into the 2-year sales study because the market was going up. The state sales study is set up, regardless of what people think, to protect the consumer, protect the taxpayer, keep the decrease as high as possible, make the increase as low as possible so that in any particular market, an increasing market or a decreasing market, you're paying the smallest amount of taxes that are possible. So as you can see, if you just went on line 12 there, if you just used the 2012 sales in that 1-year sales study, we'd have had a 2% increase in residential values. That didn't happen. We had to combine the 11 and 12 sales studies together. There was some fluctuation between what sales were allowed and what sales were not allowed at that point in time. We ended up with a 0.91 increase in assessed value and only a 0.45 increase in taxable value. That's also reflected in the projections that we've given you so far. And here's where the projections that you're getting in your 3-year budgets come into play. As you recall, I'm already 7 months into the next year's sales study. We're going to combine that with the 2012 sales study, so I'm 19 months into a 24-month sales study. I'm extraordinarily confident in the numbers that you're going to see in that projection because I'm more than 3/4 of the way through the year as far as we're concerned. That doesn't follow the real-time market. It's an assessing market that we're following here. So you can see if we had the 2% increase, right now we're looking at about 0.72 on the 2013 year. Overall, it'll be about 1.54 on the assessed value. We're predicting a CPI considerably less than the 2.7 we had this coming year. So the estimate that you'll see for the revenue stream for just the residential properties is 1%. We do a very similar thing to the commercial industrial properties. There's nowhere near as many sales. Oh, this is another point I should make. If you look at the count of the sales that we're having, this is another indication that the market is increasing because there's much more sales activity occurring. That's a good sign. That means the real estate residential market is coming back. Similar thing on the commercial industrial study, much less properties to look at. Where we get the bulk of our information here is from tax tribunal appeals. At one point in time in 2009, we had over 440 parcels under appeal. That's better than 1/3 of our entire commercial industrial roll. Includes the big office buildings, the little retail shops. I get a lot of appraisals for that type of activity for those appeals. At this point in time, there's several appeals out there for 4 years, so the appraisals cover 4 years. I can trend what the appraisers are seeing in the market to make my predictions for your budget. The other issue you have to keep in mind, I remember it was brought up that, if we're seeing 2% residential, that's a good sign. Well, it is a good sign except for the fact we're just under 60% residential right now and about 40% on the commercial industrial side. So if you see a 2% increase in your residential property and you see a 10% decrease in your commercial industrial property, you're still losing money. Back in the day, back as early as 2007, we were about 55% commercial industrial and 45% residential. Commercial market was driving the revenue stream that you guys saw. Commercial property was going up 10, 12, 14% a year. They were also able to go up by the CPI, whatever that was at that point in time, 3%, 2.5%. So most of the bulk of the revenue stream that you were seeing, the increases, was coming from the commercial industrial market. Bottom line here, first year of your budget, dead solid on the numbers. I mean, there's just no way around it. We know exactly what they're going to be. Second year of the budget, based on this study, I'm 99% confident in those numbers. Third year of the budget, I'm probably still about 97%. Once you get past that, it's a game of playing what's the CPI going to be, how much can the taxable value change. So we're very confident in the numbers we've given you. Since we started this 3-year budgeting process, like I said, the first 3 years we were 99%. We had the one down year, we were about 98%. We're right back up at 99%. So I'm very confident in that projections that we've made. And I can answer any questions you have on that. Mr. Campbell?
Just a simple question. If you were doing your appraisals on real time, I mean like today for today, at the end of the day, when we looked at this budget, would there be any appreciable difference that we would see in this budget?
It would be about less than 0.5% because you're still fighting that taxable value issue. You're still fighting the inflation issue. That's the kicker. You can see from 2012 to 2013, 2% to 0.72%. I mean, if I had to guess a year ago, I'd have said another 2% in 13. It's just not happening at this point in time. But bear in mind that Troy's housing stock is so diverse. I mean, we go all the way from 40,000 to 1.5 million in houses here, and a lot of the change that you see here depends on what type of house is selling. Right now, it's the mid-level to the entry-level home that's selling the best. The upper value homes are not selling as well. So if you get 20 or 30 of those really big houses that are selling for 70, 80% of what you think their value is, that has a detrimental effect on the overall increase. And again, these are overall increases, they're averages, but we're very confident in our numbers. Anything else?
The question I asked was just dealing with revenue going back to 2009, and I think you've answered it this way, not exactly what I was looking for, but based on what you budgeted started back in 2009 and projecting forward, you've been within 1%. Within 1% of the budget. If you did the budget to actual variance year to year starting from 2009,
Absolutely.
you've been within 1%.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're very tight with the numbers we've been in. We've done a good job of estimating the values. And again, like I say, I can do 2 years with 100% confidence, and I'm way into the 90s on that third year. The fifth year is always, it's a guess. And Tom's going to get into more of what you were asking about. I just wanted to explain this estimating process for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'll take back the page 65 last night. Okay.
Yep.
I can stall. Nice
Good job.
I think that's it. Okay. We took care of the revenue side of the equation. And as indicated, we're about 99% accurate in our projections going out at least 3 years. The variable expenditure is the expense. And all the costs that make up our expenses are not fixed, if you will, like a revenue projection. They're all variable. We can ascertain how we're going to reduce the workforce and be pretty close in finding a numerical value for reducing the workforce by X number of employees. What was unknown is how many people would take advantage of the early retirement incentive program. How many labor organizations would open up their contracts and give at least a 10% concession? And those are items that cause a state of flux to the expense line. Our goal as management, as approved by the City Council, is to essentially follow a revenue line. And as mentioned last night, back in 2010, we began essentially a race to the bottom. We knew what our revenue line was going to decline, and we had a plethora of ideas to stop having a drain on the fund balance. We couldn't guarantee it, though. The last thing you want to have is a budget that says, well, we didn't use any fund balance in our budget because we think we're going to get the labor unions open up their contracts. We think we're going to get, X number of people to take advantage of an early retirement incentive program. So the expense side becomes a variable. And the more best practices that we engage in and the more cost-efficient and effective service delivery venues we can find, the less reliance on a fund balance if we projected a fund balance into the document. And that essentially is the narrative for this. Again, we went from utilizing a fund balance in our budget of over $2 million for the year ending June 30, 2012, to actually putting back $1.9 million, and it was essentially due to employee concessions, reducing the workforce, and all the labor groups opening up their labor contracts, and the ERIP program. But if you project out, what we did essentially was save money earlier. We were projected to actually reduce the workforce by how many people, Chief?
47 overall.
47. And if no one took advantage of the early retirement incentive program, there would have been 47 layoff notices going to the police department this year as well as next year. But instead what happened is that because of the success of that program, and just want to iterate again that it was cost efficient and effective to do so, based on the methodology we used that was approved by our actuaries, we essentially advanced the savings for the fiscal year ending 2012. That's the narrative, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions. But if you want to wait for the numerical explanation from Mr. Darling, you can do that too. John?
Councilman Slater?
Some of the discussion that we had last night centered around what we were given last year in documents. So I did go in my basement and I brought up what we were given last year. And just to, I can talk for a half hour on what happened, but what we projected, or what was given to us last year, was that in 2012, which is what we're talking about right now, we were going to have 341 employees. Okay, we have 319. So what we were given was we were going to have many more people here still this year, but in 13 we were told we were going to have 324, and 2014 we were going to have 306. So that was the projection at 306, and then I believe we said to put some people back, but I do have the documentation from last year that does show what we were supposed to be at, and we are significantly lower than all of the info that we got from last year. So that is the simple explanation, and that is why we have 1.9. We were supposed to be at 341 this year. We're at 319.
Thank you. I'll turn this over to Mr. Darling.
Well, good evening. I'm glad to be back. I hope you are too. I put together just really a couple of slides to answer a couple questions that were put forward last night and again reiterated to me this morning. And that's really, what did we project for an increase or decrease in the fund balance starting back when we started a 3-year budget? Well, we started a 3-year budget. The first one was in 2011. So now we've got 2011, 2012, and 2013. And so what I tried to do is present this data and talk about then what the actuals were. Again, as we know, the budget document is a financial plan. It doesn't mean that it's always going to occur that, actuals will occur to what we budgeted. Perhaps a good example would be the transit center, right? We budgeted $9 million for a transit center a year ago. Obviously, we didn't pull the trigger on that. If we were going to look at this slide, whoops, see how we see that wrong. If we were going to look at this slide, it would look like, wow, my fund balance went up because I didn't buy a transit center, but I budgeted that I did. So again, the idea is to show that it's a plan. What we need to see here is that for 2011, all right, we're trying to show what did we project the use of fund balance to be in our 2011 budget, okay? And that's this here. And you can see the trend is to be using less and less fund balance, okay? Here's the only actual that we have. The only actual that we have today is the 2011, after the audit. But I think we should notice, though, that in your 2012 budget that you did, you projected use of fund balance in 2012 at this amount, and then less in 13, and then more in 14. Now let's look at the 2013 budget. Again, you can see that the trends in every year are the same. In 13 you were trending up, and in 12 you reiterated that you were going to trend up, and in 13 you reiterated the same thing. The same thing then as we go forward, all these trends in both budgets are the same, and they were developed by 2 different finance directors. So what we need to take away from this is that the dollar amounts themselves may not be what we need to focus on. It's the trends. And that's going to be holding true regardless of what the actual dollar amount is, and really what we should be aware of as we try and project further into the future. And I think that's the point. It's not a matter of when, it's the matter of the depth. Again, this is the result of getting to the bottom quicker, right, than the revenue stream did, as Mr. Zerlak pointed out in the previous screen. This is what you win. You win an increase in fund balance. The same thing with 2012, because we reduced our employees quicker than what we budgeted to do. We believe our reward is going to be an actual increase in fund balance as opposed to a reduction. But again, the models, you need to be looking at the trend lines, because that's really what's going to hold true, regardless of the depth. Okay? Question on fund balance?
When we talked this morning, I talked about possibly going back to 2009, because I think the trend is we're conservative budgeters, and we should be. We project the revenue stream very accurate, but many times I think our expenditures, we don't spend as much as we were anticipating. So as a result, going back to 2009, I believe if we look back, we'll see that we projected using more fund balance than
I looked for that, I didn't see any projection. Obviously, we just started the three-year budget, which I did have the information for, and was able to extrapolate that information for us. But again, I apologize, I didn't see in the files that I had, that were left for me, any previous trend information from. And really, if we were going to look at 2009, we'd have to look at 7, right? What were you projecting 2009 and 2007 and forward? But again, we'll be filling this in as we go. But it should be noted that our expenditures have flattened out, right, for basically 13, 14, and 15 as we projected out, for the most part. I mean, again, other than inflationary factors, which is going to then hold true of our actuals, will probably be closer to budget. Again, I believe they're going to be under what we budget, because the idea is the budget is a conservative financial plan. Us as professional managers try to color with inside the lines and stay, under what was been appropriated by our council.
Just have a basic question about, you touched on the transit center a little bit, and it's one of those things that doesn't show up anywhere in any of the forecasting that I can see. But it was pounded into us as we were ramping up to vote yea or nay on the transit center, what this would do to increase revenue, business in the business community in Troy. Do we have any idea or any guesstimates as to what that'll do to our revenue line 2 years out, 3 years out? Just having the transit center there and what it can do positively for us.
Yes.
We have not done an actual study and don't have a number, but what we've seen from the documentations out there, that it does increase businesses in the area because you have more people at that location. And if you carry that out even further, we potentially could build, in our master plan, we have a transit district area where we propose to have housing and trying to create a little more intensity in that area so you can build more taxable value.
Okay, further to that though, is there any inkling as to what that will do to the revenue stream in Troy to offset the 5-year out situation where we have that -5 number in the fund balance? Is there any projections there, or are we just going to ignore that until it actually happens?
Well, I can talk from a budgeting perspective. Being conservative, I would not add something that's not built yet, and getting an idea of how that's going to affect the account. From our standpoint, how would that affect taxable value? And you're correct. I mean, really, as we talked about last night, we know that our revenue streams really are going to be pretty flat. Again, it's going to be hard, as Mr. Liccardi told us, that any increase, we're limited in increases in revenue by the inflation rate, the lesser 5% inflation rate. And so really, we're going to have trouble just trying to stay up with inflation, even at our new reduced levels of service. So
if we ignore the transit center, just ignoring it, we're just going to ignore that for now and wait.
Well, I wouldn't. Again, what does that mean? What does that mean to the city? To the city revenues?
There's an old saying that the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, and all municipalities have a character about them. Some have a positive character, some have a negative character. By hiring an economic development specialist, Glenn Latham, working for Mark Miller, we're trying to develop a character that people want to come to Troy. Every month, Mark and other staff members and myself have what we call the City Managers Roundtable, and we meet with businesses every month. Those businesses are told that although they may not have a vote in the community, we want them to have a voice in the community because they are our taxpayers, if not residents. And it's a pretty informal agenda. We more or less sit down and say, this is the city of Troy, this is how we're structured, this is the kind of government that we have. What can we do as an organization to make you want to stay here and grow here and tell your colleagues to come here to Troy as well? And they let us know what they like. They do like to have different quality of life venues, good infrastructure, all underpinned by safety. You have to have a safe city. We're top drawer there. They also talk about not an inability, but a difficulty in attracting young, talented people to the area. And it's because older people like myself may like a serene setting to look at a park and so forth. The younger people like mass transit. They like a place to drink and dance at night. And so we have to essentially try to build a city that attracts young people, as well as a young workforce. The transit center, we think, is a part of that mix. It's been endorsed by people that we talk to at the Business Roundtable. It's endorsed by some residents. It's not endorsed by other residents, but that's not my problem. That's essentially a problem with the city council. The problem of staff, the challenge of staff, is to try to develop a city that has a character that a lot of people want to come and live here and stay here. As the workforce gets older and they have kids, then the school district becomes very important. We have a quality school district. So we're there on a lot of points, but we are told that by businesses that are hiring every month, it's nice to have a draw somewhat like Royal Oak has, somewhat like Birmingham has, or Grand Rapids. And we're not quite there yet. So the more diverse we can become in our offerings, I think the better it will be in terms of economic development that will eventually turn up on Tom's role, Nino's role, and Tom's revenue projections.
Pro Tem McGinnis?
And I wish I had the specific information for you, and I don't want to butcher any numbers, but I know that while we may not have specific studies that we've done in the city of Troy to give you a better idea of what the dollars that we spend on that transportation center will be for the city, I know that there are significant studies that are out there that support, several different premises, including, for every dollar you spend on transportation, you'll get a return in property values in a surrounding area, where they've gone out and actually measured distance, that you'll see different increases in property values. They've done the same for every dollar that you spend in transportation, you get a rate of return. I think the number is somewhere between 4 times and 8 times for every dollar that you spend on transportation. So that information is out there. And maybe it's something that we can take a look at as we're going forward and we're really thinking about how we're going to make up the deficit that we're talking about here in the budget sessions, and see how maybe we can get some numbers that would be more applicable to our community. But I know that the League, Michigan Municipal League, has a lot of that information because one of their tenets of the 21-3C community is transportation, and that the importance of transportation in communities. So I think the information is definitely out there, and it's probably something that we should make sure that all of us have going forward with the transit center.
Councilman Slater?
Yeah, that's a lot that I was going to say, because I remember on point the exact same thing, that we had leaders come before us, and I think Mark can back this up, that for every dollar that you put in the transit, you get 4 to 8 back. And I think the important thing to remember, though, is that the transit center, if we're lucky, will be done at the end of 2013. And we're not going to enjoy that rebound or enhancement around the transit center, I don't think, overnight. This is going to take some time. So I remember John L. Many times telling us that he would never budget for unknowns. We tried to get him to take into consideration that we were doing some things with the labor unions, and we anticipated some things being done, but he would never put that into the budget until it became a known for him. So I think Mr. Downing touched on that a little bit. I don't think we're ever going to get our finance director to budget on potential. It's always going to be on facts. I think they live on facts. And I'm encouraged that after the transit center gets built in 2013, that the area surrounding it is going to be enhanced, and that we're going to get a return of $4 to $8 for every dollar that's spent there. So I just don't think it's going to happen overnight. It's not something that we're going to be able to budget for, at least today.
Mr. Curry?
That was all really good stuff, too. And the point I wanted to make, though, because I think the short answer is, I did look at that. Councilman Slater mentioned that the center is scheduled to be completed in October of 13. We think the build-out might take another 2 years from there. That puts us past the 3-year budget cycle. So I didn't add any projections in for that. In the past, where the old Kmart site was supposed to be developed into the retail and the high-end apartments and stuff like that, we did several projections for the DDA's budget based on length of construction, where we thought they'd be at a certain time, and how much that would add to the taxable value of the city. At that point in time, we also did a budget for the DDA that didn't include that, so that we had an option available to us at that point in time. And as you're aware, none of that ever came to be true, so we just kept adopting the budget that focused on what was there. We had a budget on the side that focused on what could be there. And once we get a couple of years into the transit center, we'll start making projections based on what's going to happen according to that. The other issue with the studies that both council people in front of me mentioned was there is generally a $4 up to an $8 return for every dollar you invest in transportation. There's other studies that talk about every other type of investment. The issue you have to remember there, though, is that's not all in real estate. That's business to the restaurants, that's people buying houses. It affects your return in different ways. It doesn't necessarily come into your revenue stream as straight up taxes. So maybe $4 to $8 is your return on your investment, and maybe $2 is your return in taxable value. Thank you.
My point in bringing that up is simply to make sure that that's on the table, because there was so much doom and gloom last night. You know, I had a phone call this morning from somebody in a newspaper wanting to know, you know, what I thought about the city being bankrupt in 5 years. And, you know, I mean, we don't need those kind of firestorms.
No, and
so if there's at least some other nuggets out there, it should at least be talked about.
Councilman Fleming, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Councilman Fleming.
Thank you, Councilman Henderson. I agree. I don't believe for 1 minute that this management team, our next city manager, or the council, whoever's on the council, is going to allow slide 66 to come to fruition. Didn't believe it last night, don't now. We're basically conservative. When I asked the question about fund balance last night and this morning, basically the answer is our revenues are spot on, pretty much. Maybe a little conservative, as Mr. Licari says, but I think the transit center is probably the next generation who's going to see the benefit of that, maybe not ours, okay? I think it's farther out than them to really see some major impact. But I believe, and Mr. Darling's indicated today, our expenses are going to be budgeted conservative, which means, you know, we should be able to beat the budget. By that, I mean we should not be able to use, should not have to use all the fund balance that's projected. But that requires management, and I firmly believe we demonstrated last year and the last couple of years what being proactive can do. And as Mr. Zerlak says, we slayed the elephant. Now we're hunting rabbits or whatever. We just have to find more rabbits. But I don't believe for 1 minute, I'm not thinking doom and gloom. There's no way that in 2017 the city of Troy is going to be taken over by the state, because this management team, the new city manager, and whoever's on council just will not allow that to happen. That's not our track record. We're going to be proactive. But I think this is just probably the worst case scenario. But we have to have this as a guideline. But it's just not going to happen. I think we're going to be much better with a lot of hard work.
City management presented City Council with a similar scenario about 3 years ago. And we were alarmists, and there was a conspiracy to raise your taxes $40. And it could not be true. What happened is that, turn that off, please. What happened is that it was true. And we were not being doom and gloom. Many cities are at or near bankruptcy because they had 1 year budget. They kicked the can down the road a year at a time, including the state of Michigan, until Governor Snyder came in and wanted a multi-year budget. What we did in 2010 was to take a revenue line that we knew was 99% accurate, and we extrapolated business as usual without a millage increase. And I'm not opining for a millage increase, but we had to have a model which indicated that if there is not a way of us changing the way we operate, in 2012 and 13, there would have been a financial manager here because there was not enough fund balance based on that declining revenue line that raced straight down. I was, our employees and our council and best practices bought us 6 years. I don't think any other city has 6 years to figure out their challenge. We do. And the intent was not to be gloom and doom or to be an alarmist, but was to say, you know what? You have 3 years of good, sound service delivery venues the way things are now, because we made all these massive changes. There's no longer the employees to cut. From my perspective, there's no longer the concessions to be made. They're already made. Cuts are made. We already privatized all of the on-demand service delivery venues. I can't think of another city that's privatized an entire building department. You can go to other cities, and their building inspectors are counting nails in the drywall to keep busy, and Mark Miller will tell you that developers will not go in those cities because of how onerous they are in permitting and plan review process. The only intent that Tom and Nino and Mark and I had in developing this was to say, please don't use your fund balance, because if all you had was a 1 year or even a 3 year look, you could actually justify hiring people to enhance our level of service, but then you'd lay them off 2 years later. The only intent here is to say, you know what, if you continue with our current revenue, which is going to be 99% accurate, and you assume about a 2 to 3% increase in expenses, which is going to be what the cost of living is, then these numbers are going to be correct. But you have a lot of years, as Mr. Fleming said, to make sure that doesn't happen. We made sure it didn't happen in 2010, and now it's up to the council and management to make sure it doesn't happen in 2017. The only purpose was that, in good conscience, we could not say, hire back 10 police officers. That came up 2 meetings ago. And so we were compelled to say, here's what would happen if you don't hire anybody. It's going to be a problem in 6 years. Not that it's going to be a problem. You have 6 years to solve this problem.
Councilman Slater?
Well, John said almost everything that I was going to say, because 3 of us were here 2 years ago when the exact same thing was presented to us, and thank goodness we took a stand that we weren't going to let that happen. And it didn't happen, and thanks for a lot of reasons it didn't happen. And I couldn't agree with Councilman Fleming more, that I'm very confident there isn't a council in Troy that would ever let this happen. We'll figure some way to make sure that that does not happen. But I thank the administration for bringing this forward, because I was in the same boat that I think Councilman Teets was and Councilman Fleming, that I want to do something for the employees, and I want to do something for the police department and public safety and all of that. And if we could, I wanted to do that. And I've even had conversations with Councilman Teets regarding that. And if I had not seen the 5-year projection, I think we may have promoted doing some things that maybe we shouldn't have done. So I appreciate this, because I wanted to do some things, and today I think we have to wait because of what I saw here. But we'll never let this happen.
No.
We will. I can tell every citizen in Troy that we will never, ever let this happen.
Councilman Teets?
And 2 years ago, we were presented with the same thing, and it didn't happen. We won't let it ever happen.
Councilman Teets?
Jim was ahead.
Different strategic plan.
Go ahead.
I don't have anything.
No, go ahead. I'll follow you.
Please.
All right. Yeah, I never took this as a doom and gloom. Actually, I thought it was a very excellent heads up to everybody, not only here and also in the city. And I think as we move forward, we've got some serious challenges. But I hear, what about the transit center? What about the housing? Those are all great things. If those all go the right way, that's a great thing to happen. But that's a big what if. So if we move forward, we're going to have to kind of set those on the side if they happen. That's all gravy. We're going to have some, we've got some serious issues in front of And it's, what's going to come down to is what kind of guts does this council have? You know, Mr. Clearlight, I think he went out on a limb yesterday when he was talking about it. I think he made it very clear that he felt very good about telling us this. I think he did an excellent job. Everybody did it. But it's going to really depend on how much guts this group has got to really help the city move forward, because it's not going to be a very, very easy task, I don't think.
Councilman Teets?
Ditto to everything that was said about slide 67 or whatever it was. What I'd like to see next year, you'll be enjoying Florida. Tom, you'll probably be staying there, or someone else will be staying there. I'd like to see that stuff up front, because seeing at the end doesn't help us with the budgeting process. It only gives the alarm bell, and so the next day we have a meeting and we have people from the media coming here because they've heard an alarm bell. What I'd like to see is to know this ahead of time so we can have an educated discussion for however many hours we've had, and so we can look at it and have that discussion. I think that is just good budgeting, you know. The second thing is, and the presentation was very good, and you did a great job, but I'm going through the presentation. If next year we could get the presentation a couple days early. I went through this, then we have that up there, just time to prepare ourselves. And again, I'm probably out of order as far as things, but I want to mention this while it's still on my list, because that would be really helpful for us as a council. Agree, disagree, generally. But I guess my concern with last night, when we have the dire straits, let's not talk about the waterfall at the last moment. Let's talk about waterfall in 5 years, and we got to get up, you know, the kayaks needs to start moving to the shore. But let's not talk about that at the end of the budgeting process. And that was kind of frustrating to me, because we've been discussing this for quite a bit, and the 3-year looks great, but if that's a projection for 4 and 5, I think it's fair to get that out there early. So good news, bad news, or otherwise, I mean, that's a projection.
If I could bring the transit center and the budget back together, again, what I would like to see is a new expenditure unit in the capital project category that would be strictly for the transit center expenditures. I've had residents talk about what happened to the legal costs that were spent and the consulting costs. Some architectural dollars have been spent, I believe, and we're looking now to hire a construction manager at risk. In fact, I think that may have already taken place. But those are costs that the citizens need to know about, and I think it would be really beneficial to have it in a separate expenditure unit so that we could track them easily enough, and then also so we could have a guideline for the Troy Chamber of Commerce to be able to see what their goals have to be in their effort to cover the expenses associated with the transit center. Would that be possible?
Let me say 2 things, and then I'll have Mark follow up with more specificity. One is that because it's a grant, we have to have our own accounting for that grant that gets reviewed and scrutinized by the feds before they send us a reimbursement check. And we can make sure that that is online, if you will, for that project. And that's just the same thing as having to be in a budget document. You know, there could be a link to the transit center, and that'll show the progress that's made every 30 or 60 or 90 days, whatever. Essentially, hopefully Mark would decide on. And there would be an indication of what the costs were for that time frame that went to the federal government and what the reimbursement was, and then the user can see that it's essentially a one-to-one issue, where if we ask for $600,000, we're going to get reimbursed $600,000, but more than that, they'll know what it's for. And secondly, about the Chamber of Commerce, just today I spoke with some staff members. In fact, Mark Miller, Steve Van Ditt, our city engineer, and Gwen Lapin, our economic development specialist, and the chamber wants some involvement in the design, which they can have to see if there's something that would be applicable for their enhancements to market the transit center. And then we're going to float Gwen Lapin, our economic development specialist, as part of a team to work with the Chamber of Commerce to develop their business plan. The good news is that primarily thanks to Mark Miller and Steve Van Dett, it's looking almost certain that Amtrak is going to pay all the operating costs for the transit center. And a contract is under review at this time. It's very similar, if not identical, to the contract that Amtrak has with Dearborn. Is that correct, Mark?
That is correct, and the only thing that I would correct what John said is if we have any other concessionaires or anyone else in the building, then Amtrak would expect a prorated cost. Then their cost would go down, and whoever else is in the building, their costs, they would cover the other remaining costs.
Would that be acceptable?
It sounds good. Sounds good.
I'm sure Mark will make that so. Thank you, Mark.
Councilman Slater.
On that point, Mark and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the city of Troy is not going to pay one dime out of its pocket for this transit center, okay? The legal fees that we incurred to sue Grand Saqua, we pay for a city attorney, we pay for a staff, those don't cost, there is not a cost to the citizens for that, per se. Just like any other lawsuit that we have to cover, that's done in-house. That's the good thing about having an in-house attorney, in my opinion, is for issues like that. So I think we need to make sure that the citizens always understand this transit center isn't going to cost anything to them. We've gone out of our way to make sure that the operating and maintenance costs are going to get covered. And I'm confident, and I was going to say something Monday, but we're going to get a report every month from the chamber about what's going on with the business plan after these meetings that take place. And I want every citizen that lives in this city to know that we're not only going to cover the operating and maintenance costs, but we're going to generate revenue because of the transit center. And in hopes of being able to cover some other costs there, but I don't know if Mrs. Bloom wants to speak about the legal fees, but I think it would be fair to respond to that.
Mayor, I'll just add, first of all, we didn't sue Grand Saqua sued us. So I think that's a critical distinction. We were sued, we didn't initiate that, but we were responsive to that. I would just also add that we are in-house. We have performed all of the services in-house. We get paid the same amount whether we work 80 hours a week or 40 hours a week. So that is correct.
Good. Thank you. Councilman T.
And Councilman Slater, I appreciate you generating revenue to the city, and so hopefully about $2 million a year. Is that what you're willing to guarantee for the city?
I think when the chamber comes before us at the next meeting, we can set that as a goal.
I think that would be an appropriate goal for them.
That would be a great goal.
Agreed? Okay. So
Good.
we can move on?
Okay. Anyway, yeah, so in summary, again, the 5-year forecast is, by definition, what we know today projected out. In no way is that to incite, doom and gloom, other than to bring the attention of the work we still have yet to do. So that's, I guess we're done with the fund balance issue, and we'll continue on.
Sure. This, of course, is up to the governing body. Would you want Tom to address the various emails that we received, or do you want to talk about the museum?
Well, I have a question. Councilman Flynn, were you going to say something? No? The question that I posed on Sunday, and thank you very much, Mr. Darling, for the answer that you provided to me, that I received yesterday. I didn't have time to research your answer until last night. My question and my concern was that the budget, the 2011-12 budget was developed in, say, April of 2011. and that was for June 2011 to June 2012. And the dollar amount that was the total city budget was $133.8 million. Then in April of 2012, now we've gone quite a way into the budget year, it was estimated that it was going to be $122.8 million. So there's a $11 million differential, and I agree with you that it is very good that the city operates under their budget. That's very commendable. That's the way it should be. I understand that. But that's a big difference, and I understand that it was in capital expenditures that big differential occurred. So my question is, if capital spending can have such a wide variance in one year, why would we need to raise millage rates this year based upon a long-term guesstimate of this drastic use of our fund balance when right now we look pretty healthy? My problem with a millage increase of any kind are based upon some statistics that I read in the Department of Tech Management budget April of 2012. From December of 2011 to February of 2012, that's a 3-month period, in Michigan, food went up 0.6%, housing went up 0.8%, apparel went up 1.9%, transportation was up 0.17%, medical care was up 1.2%, education was up 0.4%, energy was up 3.1%. The only listed category that showed a reduction was in recreation. So while we're all worried about keeping our houses, paying our bills, keeping our jobs, we have to spend, or we can spend less money having fun. So I believe that based upon today's budget of these increases in every single category that we pay on a daily basis, with our fund balance intact at 34%, and the budget looking good for the next few years, I can't support a millage increase of any size in any category. And that would be my problem, and I would like discussion on council to my thoughts. We could always wait until we have our new management in place and we have fresh eyes and we look again in 2012, 2013. If we need a millage increase at that point, we can reopen that discussion. Councilman Teets?
We're talking about this, which villages will increase, and I want to get into later millage versus user fee in that discussion, but first, what are we talking about?
Again, to answer the mayor's question, there is no increase in the general fund millage nor your capital project millage at all.
Correct.
What the millage increase that are proposed are special revenue funds that are to fund themselves, and that's your refuge fund, okay, and a millage pays to sustain the collection of refuge, which again is, you noted last night that over the years you've basically bottomed out fund balance in that category. Again, it's a specific millage for a specific service, just like the library. I can't spend library millage money on the general fund or on the refuge fund or on the debt service fund. Same thing, but vice versa. I can't spend refuge money on the library. So again, the millage that's being proposed is just to support the services of refuge collection. The only other one that we suggested an increase for is your debt service. Again, debt service is a defined amount that by the vote of the people agreed to have whatever millage it takes to pay that debt service off over the life of the debt. And that's the only things that we proposed, and that was really just about both of those special revenue funds back online with revenues matching the expenditures that they're incurring. Back to your original question, what you're looking at in your 2012 document related to one page to another is you've got two different perspectives. And it's not, again, as I put in my comment, first of all, you've got two different pages of two different things that are telling two different stories, A. B, I can certainly understand, the comment of that we budgeted for capital projects, but we didn't spend it. Again, capital projects in themselves are separate from your general fund. and they're a completely different thing. And nobody's suggesting an increase for capital projects. Basically, we budgeted the use of what we've got there based on our current millage rates. And I'd be happy to explain what you're looking at and why there are differences that were proposed in the 2012 budget and what those stories are telling.
Before we get too far, can we get the correct pages? I got page 63 here. Where, is it in here someplace?
126.
126? All right, thank you.
So, we're going to the refuge?
Refuse and recycling, is that what you were discussing, correct?
What page is that?
126. Thank you, sir.
Could I see? Are you taking a break, or are you going to continue with?
It is my understanding, and I think it's important we get this confirmed before the night's out. It is my understanding that folks will pay more in taxes if they have trash or if they use water. But it's a user, according to how much, how much water you use, or if you
Correct.
trash
Recycling
recycle.
monitored. Absolutely. It can be gauged. It can be.
Every household pays the same amount, if you will, for rubbish and garbage, whether they put out 2 bags or 8 bags.
Sure.
So it's a user fee, but it's not volumetric. Okay? Especially with Tringali, put a piano out there, they'll pick it up for the same cost. Other communities, just so that you may know, do not consider rubbish and garbage collection as part of a municipal service. And they tell their residents, here's a list of contractors, you're not allowed to have blight in your backyard or burn your trash, so contract with somebody and have your garbage picked up. That would not go well in Troy, because we can guarantee that because of our tax structure, any resident in Troy would pay more to have a private company pick up their trash once a week than they're paying to have the city contract out to have it picked up once a week. That's guaranteed. But you don't have to have, as a city, trash pickup.
Right. And that part is true. I acknowledge other places that have pickup. I am never excited about increasing millages. But these are pass-through expenses that have been passed on to us from the Detroit Water and by SACRA. We can do one of two things. Either people can pay exactly for what the usage is, what it costs, or else we can dip into whatever money there is in that fund, or into the reserve fund. My philosophy is you pay exactly what you use. And if you want to run your sprinklers every other day the entire summer, when that's up to you, you're going to pay more. But on this, I don't see how this would be imposing anything on folks that they wouldn't sign themselves up for. I mean, it's your choice. So,
Councilman Slater.
I thought Mayor Pro Tem answered the question perfectly when Councilman Henderson brought it up last time, to maybe use fund balance to supplement that. And I don't think it's good to represent just a carte blanche. I'm not in favor of millage increases when you're talking about this type, personally. There's a difference between, in my opinion, raising your taxes than there is for this. This was tried once before to reduce down the millage for refuse and recycling, and it caused us a serious problem. All we're asking is that whatever it costs us to pick up recycling, that's what the cost is, okay? If it goes up, we pay up. If it goes down, we reduce it down. It can do this, and I just don't think it's correct to lump that into the whole millage issue, because that to me is not a fair representation. This is not an increasing in millage, in my opinion. This is just passing along a cost. But I thought Mayor Pro Tem McGinnis answered the question perfectly last time. I don't know if you're going to do that again or not.
Well, things that come out of my mouth, I don't know if I can recreate it again, but my argument has always been with this, because it was an issue when I first came into office, so I was schooled pretty quickly on the rationale behind how this works, why it's separate. I mean, the law actually provides us the specific power to raise a millage up to 3 mills for this purpose, and it's taken out of the general fund, I think, for that purpose, so we can do exactly what we're trying to do, which is not convolute the problem and put it in with everything else. We're specifically able to do this, and I think our goal has been to rectify what happened in 2008 and 2009, is to get it back to the level where we are essentially charging the residents or the businesses to pick up the trash for what the service is actually costing us. And I think some of you have probably received emails, maybe recently and over the last 2.5 years, from residents that this is a service that they're willing to pay for. And I understand your argument. I think just looking at the total costs that are rising for everyone, I can see where that argument could play into this emotionally, but I think the fact of the matter is we can see from the numbers that when we were in a situation before, when I think people had an issue with this, the millage in general and raising any type of millage, it was scrambling to find a way not to do that. And essentially you can see here, it was just a straight line where the expenditures are exceeding the revenues for that. And it was depleting our fund balance, and that's not a situation that we want to be in. It's not something I think we would agree to do with any other fund, so I don't think we should do it with this fund, and the law specifically gives us the power to not have to do that. So I feel pretty firmly about these two particular issues, and luckily we can look at them separately from everything else.
Nor would I suggest rating the fund balance. That's not my intent. My intention is to force us to look again at maybe some cost savings and see if we can lower the expenditure line before we increase the revenue line, because there does come a point in the day when the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end of the taxpayer's rainbow is empty. And this is one small way that I think we could say, well, we're going to make an extra effort. I see there's some reduction, some years of reduction in various points along the chart, and maybe we could look at it again. Again, we're having new management, and all deference to Manager Zerleg. I think you've done a fascinating job, and I'm in no way making deference to you. I'm simply saying new management, fresh eyes, and some encouraging numbers on the residential sales. And maybe we can wait a year. I'm not saying that it's impossible or improbable that we could do that. It's just this year I don't think is the right time.
I can address that. Again, your expenditures are contract expenditures for the most part, so I don't have the ability to lower them other than through the contracts. If we don't, we'll be filing a deficit elimination plan with the state. We will not be able to survive 2013. This fund won't be able to without some kind of revenue stream to do that. Again, it's bottoming out now, and the idea is we try to set as minimum of a millage proposal as we could to bring it off the bottom and at least try to get it to match our contracted expenditures. I mean, This is the very minimum that we're proposing, in my opinion, that we would.
Councilman Henderson?
Just 2 points on that, and something that I addressed with Mr. Zerlag a while ago, and maybe you can clear it up in my head, and we can open that discussion again. But one is, I understood that that was completely a pass-through. We didn't really have an option. If the cost went up for refuse collection, then the people paid higher for it. Is that correct or not correct?
It's correct in the sense that city council, previous council, this council can do whatever it likes. Previous council had a very simple policy. It follows what Mr. Teets said. Whatever it costs to collect garbage is what we're going to charge. And again, if you were to take a look at the private sector and see what they charge individual residents, like up in Rochester Hills, I'll bet the cost is 4 to 5 times greater than what the Troy resident pays for rubbish and garbage pickup through an economy of scale with the contractor that we have, through an economy of scale with SACRA, which has a lot of communities buying together for disposal and recyclables, because when you have a contract for recyclables, that not only do you lower costs by getting revenue for glass and cardboard and metal and paper, but you also get a reduced cost by having an avoidance of that material going to a landfill. And the large benefit that a city like Troy has with a fair amount of commercial industrial properties is that they too pay the same refuse rate that is enjoyed by the residents only. Somerset Collection, our largest taxpayer, pays their share of this refuse rate, yet you don't see 20,000 garbage bags on Big Beaver Road. They don't use our contractor. They use, on their own expense, trash compactors and their own haulers to take away the garbage from their huge facility of Somerset North and South. Yet the resident is a consumer of services, and commercial industrial properties are a donor of services. It's really true in rubbish and garbage collection, because the commercial industrial properties, they pay a refuse rate, yet they don't use the refuse contractors, so that fund of money goes in to defray the cost to the resident, and that's why other cities that do not use any refuse collector and tell the residents, my mother's one of them in Genoa Township, pays a lot of money to get the trash picked up every week, and there's huge restrictions. You can put a piano out on the curb, and there's no extra cost. If my mom did that, there'd be probably a $50 or $100 assessment on that 1 week to pick up the rubbish and garbage. So you're not going to find a more cost-efficient method. Sorry for the long answer, but you're not going to find a more cost-efficient method than what you have now. What it costs to pick up garbage and rubbish is what we're charging.
Okay, but to define the answer then, it is up to us to either put that millage through or not. If we don't put the millage through to just keep up the cost, then it would have to come from some other source, and that would be the general fund.
Tom will correct me if I'm wrong. With these kinds of funds, you can take money out of the general fund balance to another fund, but you can't take money out of that other fund and give it back to the general fund.
Okay, and now,
That's correct.
the second part of that, and this is the part that we had a conversation back in, it looks like 2007, 2008, as a group of communities, we got together and negotiated a better rate. Is that, I think Mr. Licari had mentioned that in one of our first meetings. And the question I have after that is, you follow that graph line up, it was explained to us that, the cost of fuel and whatnot has gone up exponentially, and that's it's driving the increase. But the question I have, and if you could address this for everybody, is when we combine with other communities and forfeit our right to individually negotiate for the city of Troy, was that a positive or a negative for us to be able to influence what the city of Troy, the people of Troy pay?
I discussed that with Mr. Richmond, the Public Works Director, and it was a very positive for us, very positive.
I also helped with the negotiations, and yes, it was certainly more beneficial. We did consider, standalone, but it certainly was much more beneficial to join in.
That first year, I see the spike. That first year was very beneficial, but now going on, as we project ourselves off into the future, is Troy now at a disadvantage, being probably the largest community in all of this group of communities, from a negotiation standpoint, getting a better contract rate?
I don't think so, but, and you, over time, contracts will come up, and as council, you'll have the opportunity to review that when those contracts come up.
Councilman Fleming?
Question, somewhere it's in the data here, but what is the cost per household for refuse trash pickup annually? And
On average, it's about $153.
And we're talking of a .09?
With this increase.
That would be an increase of how much?
$28. It would be just over.
What were we looking
It would be about $103.
103?
Yes.
The increase?
No, in total. With the increase, it's about $103.
The cost now is?
With the proposed increase, on an annual basis, would be about $103.
What's it now?
Oh, what?
96?
Yeah, I
Were
mean,
you
what am
looking
I?
96?
$6, $7.
So we're talking, this discussion, what I'm saying, this discussion is about $7 a year per household. You know, that's the point. On average, you know, and that's a value for me. I understand philosophically what the discussion's about, but for me, passing a cost on, and it's I guess it's a 7% increase or thereabout, but for my garbage to be picked up at my curb and my recycling to be picked up every week, once a week, on a regular schedule for just over $100 a year is a bargain.
Well, I agree,
I understand.
but when you look at the big picture and all of the costs of everything are going up, and there are people who are losing their homes, there are
Yes.
people who are losing their jobs, and if the city is in a good, healthy position right now, and there's a possibility that there could be more communities that would want to join in our contractual agreement, that we might even be able to reduce costs further, I think it's just something that should be looked at. I agree with you, it's a small amount, but I thought it important that when some of us campaigned that we aren't going to let a millage increase occur, we live by what we campaign. I think everyone in the room, whether or not they agree with me philosophically, would have to say that it would be nice if people would vote the way they campaign, generally speaking. So I thought, oh, Councilman Henderson.
My only point in all of this is, you talked yesterday about we slayed the elephants, and now all we have is rabbits to slay. Well, if you let rabbits multiply, for any length of time, you have a gazillion rabbits. So we have to slay the rabbits, and a $6 a year is a rabbit.
Yeah, it is.
And if you allow these $6 here and $100 here, and over the population, it does make a difference. So we have to keep that in the forefront. And on the 2%, the DDA or the debt service millage increase, that is, we have to pay the debt service, obviously, so that's just going to happen, period. We have no ability to do anything with that. Is that a correct statement?
Debt service has to be paid,
It
yes.
has to be paid, so that
Has to be paid in
that
all.
is an increase in millage that,
Just to match, right, we've been expending basically fund balance more than the revenue has been generating for about the last 3 years now, in the tune of about $500,000 in 11. It'll be about $1 million and 900 and some odd thousand in 12. And so again, we're just aligning the ship back with the debt service payments that are going to be required to be made.
okay, but that's a mandatory increase, or is that one also that the council could say, no, we don't want to increase, and still that would be drawn out of the fund balance? I thought I heard you earlier say that.
Again, you're drawing down your fund balance. And again, the debt service has got to be paid at some point. And you're obligated, and it's a legal requirement that we collect that. And if you didn't do it through the debt service fund, I mean, you would have to do it through the general fund. But again, the voters passed the millage that we will have a millage to pay the debt. And all we're doing is again, a slight increase to match what our debt service payments are going forward. Because we have been spending fund balance consistently over the last 3 years. Just a note on the SACRA issue, which is the one that governs our contracts. There's 58 votes, and we have 14 votes out of all the votes, significantly more than any other community that's in SACRA. So our voice is being heard, and we're able to leverage what we deem is right for our community in that organization.
Thank you.
What's next?
Were your concerns addressed?
Certainly.
Okay.
The museum next, I think that's what's on the slate. Do you mind if I invite Lorraine Campbell to the table, because she knows more than all of us put together about the museum historic society operation?
John, Mayor, this slide here, I don't think we quite got to that one. Was there something specific you wanted to mention?
Did you want to bring that up? Well, there was a quick question. I just want to take a second to speak again. So just a quick question, just to go over again, what's unrestricted fund balance versus unassigned versus restricted? Again, this is the same graph that you've seen last night and what the makeup is. And just to go over it, more clarity of what is in this restricted part. And again, it's really just the same chart that we had last night, and just a definition of, the restricted assigned fund balance includes items that are A, non-spendable in nature, such as prepaid expenditures and fund advances, council committed reserves, such as the volunteer fire incentive reserve, and the appropriated fund balance for the subsequent year's budget. Also includes assigned reserves for insurance claims and tax appeals. So those are the items that make up basically the, again, restricted or assigned part. So when you talk about unassigned fund balance, it's not just a formula of revenues over or under expenditures. It also includes any shifts in these reserves. And that's the only point. There was a question regarding maybe some more clarity of what made up, quote, this restricted or unassigned fund balance. Right. Thank you.
Councilman Slater.
We also had this item laid on the table, the annual budget by account classification. What was your reason for that?
Yeah, I was approached with a question of, in your other charges for the general fund, which the detail is in your budget, correct? There's a line item called miscellaneous, and there's a question of what's in that, quote, line item called miscellaneous, and this is expanding that section out to show you what items are in there. And again, the big one is the required contribution to the Fire Incentive Reserve Trust for, again, we budgeted about $1 million. That's the big one in that line item. But again, it's just a breakout of everything that's in there. Bring more clarity.
Mrs. Campbell? Did you have a presentation?
No, I did not. I'm just here to answer any questions. We provided the documentation that you asked, so you have that in your packets.
Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes, thank you. We're going through the expenses. Just kind of curious, your total expenses are $387,000. $78,000 is prepaid right now, according to this. And you've got salaries of 164, taxes of 14,000, employment tax, and a consultant of 62, which comes to 241,000, or almost 54% of your total budget. I'm just kind of curious, what's involved in all those numbers up there? Because when you spoke the other day, you were talking about how many volunteers there are.
Right.
I'm just kind of curious where all this money is going to.
If you review the 5-year letter of agreement that the city has with the Troy Historical Society, it stipulates that the Historical Society will employ a full-time director. That's a significant share of the salaries. It's my salary. We also have 5 part-time employees, and the majority of them are teachers that do our education programs, which is our single largest source of revenue. The consultants represent a significant portion of the seed money that you provided going forward. We consulted with Cranbrook Institute of Science. They provided us with development ideas. They helped us with our website. They helped us promote our programs. They have provided us with a database of teacher contacts in southeastern Michigan, some 5,000 contacts that we haven't really been able to use yet because we don't have the resources to fully utilize that database. We also retained services of a grant writer and looked at different options for financial management. Obviously, the employee taxes and insurance are required by law.
Do you have a written plan on how you're going to use this